Hello. Today's experiment is called Fugitive Alien, a wonderful film from Japan, not to be confused with The Fugitive, the classic television series which can be seen weekdays right here on A&E. This is actually a strung-together series of Japanese shows which, when put together in this way, make for what I think is some of the best TV has to offer.
This time we watch Season 3, Episode 10, Fugitive Alien.
Where we follow the crew of the Mighty Jack on their Forklift! This is the Forklift one!
Yes, this is the Forklift one! But we still need to have some follow-up first.
No, we don't, because we're recording this before we've released the previous episode. So we don't know what letters we're getting or what response we're getting from that one. And we have so much to say that we gotta get right to it and try to kill this movie with a forklift. Take it away, me. This time we watched Season 3, Episode 10, Fugitive Alien. Let's be clear, this isn't a movie. It's a bunch of Japanese TV shows stitched together, badly and incoherently. But let's do what we can with it. Ken is a wolf raider with superhuman strength from the planet Valna, and he's also part of an invasion force attacking Earth. He's out with his friend and partner, not his romantic partner, his shooting people partner, when they find a little Earth boy, and his partner calls out to him, "Shoot him!" And the boy's mother calls out to the boy, "Ken, come back, Ken!" Ken, the wolf raider, is unwilling to shoot a child, especially one with his own name, and when his fellow soldier tries to kill the mother and child, Ken stops him permanently. Uh-oh. Now branded a traitor to the people of Valna, he runs away. You might even say he's a fugitive. An alien who's a fugitive. He ultimately ends up aboard an Earth vessel, the Bacchus 3, under the leadership of the hard-drinking, straight-shooting, kind-hearted Captain Joe. Captain Joe is basically Lou Grant in space. He takes Ken under his wing, especially once he hears Ken's backstory. The rest of the crew of the Bacchus 3 are not so sure about this guy. Second-in-command Rocky begins to suspect that Ken is from Valna, and even tries to kill him with a... well, you know. But before long, Ken fits in with the misfit crew of the Bacchus 3, and they go on missions together. Okay, but the thing is, Valna is being ruled by an evil dictator, Lord Halkin, and Halkin is none too happy about Ken's betrayal, so he tasks Ken's dead friend's sister, Rita, to uphold Valnan tradition and avenge her brother's death. But here's the tricky thing about that. Ken and Rita were dating, and now Rita has to kill him. Awkward. Well, Rita finally tracks down Ken as he's helping a foreign dignitary, like an alien dignitary. You know what I mean. Anyway, whatever. Ken has just helped free this guy from jail when Rita tracks him down. Now, will Rita actually honor her brother by killing her love? Turns out, no. Not even when Ken encourages her to. So, will Ken and Rita run off together and live happily ever after? No. Ken thinks that Rita will always think of him as her brother's murderer, so the relationship is ruined. With that plot arc completed, will Rita get to live much longer? No. She's gunned down by random people almost immediately. Well, at least she dies thinking that Ken killed her. Oh, and we also find out that Ken's father was a missionary from Earth. He's not even of Valnan heritage. He's just super strong because he grew up in its supergravity or, something like that. Anyway, the end? A message appears on the screen, to be continued, in Star Force, Fugitive Alien 2. Coming to It's Just a Show, probably next summer.
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, Joel likes the bots to have some experience with what real life back on Earth is like. This time it's playing farm with good old Farmer Joel and GPC Cow and a couple of freaked out chicken bots. Frank sums it up best. E-I, I don't think so. The Mads have an invention that turns the medicine that helps into the squirt that hurts, when all the eye, nose, throat drops combine into one mega torture device. Joel answers with the very playful, very fun musical chair. It's a lawn chair made out of a big kid's rainbow xylophone. That's, everybody perfectly on brand for this opener, actually. Speaking of on brand, Jack Perkins is here. The dulcet tones of Jack Perkins listing the upcoming lineup in his PBS-esque radio announcer style is such a delight. Inspired by the helmet with blonde wig attached in the movie, Joel encourages Tom and Crow to join him in a fabulous hat party. Punk space, Patti LaBelle in space, all inspiring. But maybe Joel goes a little too far when mocking Frank and Dr. Forrester with hats. Jack Perkins thinks it's a sheer delight and about as grand as a hat party can get. How right you are, Jack Perkins. Our next much-needed movie break finds Crow and Tom in vinyl spacesuits playing Ken as Joel is Captain Joe, an effect he achieves by stuffing his cheeks with grapes. It's like when Marlon Brando stuffed his cheeks with cotton balls in The Freshman to spoof himself in The Godfather. Joel is funnier, though, and Captain Joe's laugh, spot on, Joel, spot on. Sometimes, to make sense of a plot, we need an external source to give us a framework for understanding. Joel has found the perfect guide from Sid Field, giving us an insight into the 3-act structure of screenwriting. With Sid Field, you'll never be bamboozled by a script again. Jack lends a hand with his own delightful theories about Fugitive Alien, only to be struck down by Dr. F's hammer and chisel. Joel will not be outdone by the tiny nuclear bomb buttons on Ken's uniform, so he has buttons of his own. Ones that will make the robots rue the day they even thought about touching them, which makes me want to touch the buttons more, so I can't imagine this is very effective detriment for Crow or Tom. I especially want the portion control button, actually. That seems really powerful and helpful. The crew reads a letter about that cool thing contest, claiming that actually we were looking at mankind living in peace through a time portal. But Joel reveals it was just Mexican spotlight candy. The Mads are going to do a little genetic engineering to defeat the unfailing gravitas of Jack Perkins. But his delight will not be stopped. I know it. After all, he still needs to join us for Thanksgiving. What do you think, sirs?
Have you ever been to a hat party?
I've been to the Hat Museum.
Okay. Where's that?
The Hat Museum is in the area of Portland where you and I used to rent a house together called Lad's Edition.
Oh.
It was one of the old, craftsman-esque homes that were there. And actually, your mother went there with me.
Oh, wow.
It was wonderful. It was lots of fun. It was the perfect outing for your mother and I. But we did not have a hat party afterwards.
They didn't let you try them on.
No, these were like actual historic hats. Like a couple of them were reproductions, but most of them were like real historic hats in glass cases and stuff.
I'm a little surprised that I didn't realize that the Hat Museum was like 3 blocks away from us, but looking online real quick, it appears that it doesn't really advertise itself very much on the outside, so...
I don't even know how your mom found it, because she's the one who said, we need to go to this. You will love this, and I will love this, and we need to do this. And I was like, yes, you're right, 100%.
Fair enough. I've never been at a hat party, But I was in a theater production back when I lived in Portland. It was an experimental theater production of a Carol Churchill play. And for whatever reason, we were made hats. Everybody was made hats. I was just an extra. There was just one scene where a bunch of us extras, sort of each wearing a fabulous hat, sort of emerged from behind the curtain and just sort of, I don't know, zombie walked to the front of the stage or something. It was very artsy, I'm sure. But like the point is that I ended up with one that looked a bit like a military helmet, but with like plants growing out of it and everything.
Wonderful.
I still have it. I got to keep the hat, so that's nice. I don't have many occasions to wear it, but I do still own it.
That's so funny. I've had friends who have done like Kentucky Derby parties and encouraged people to wear large, grandiose hats, you know, with lots of things on top of them so that it basically looked like a scene from My Fair Lady.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's tradition for the Kentucky Derby, I guess, that and you drink mint juleps.
Yeah, you got to dress yourself up like a Bloody Mary and drink mint juleps, of course.
Exactly.
We are back watching Fugitive Alien. How was it like in the Comedy Central era?
So they made some really excellent choices with the editing for the Comedy Central era. There was about 15 minutes of climbing through rock piles that did not happen in season 3 that we totally got to slog through in KTMA. And I gotta say, editors, good choice. Those scenes were not adding to the comedy, nor were they adding to the movie for Fugitive Alien. But it was really nice. I thought that the cut of the movie flowed a little bit better. Their riffing was phenomenal for it, like way better than KTMA. And KTMA was fun too, just in a really different way. What did you think?
So I think last time we talked about, I don't know, I haven't listened to the tape yet. I think last time we talked a bit about how this is kind of an important episode for the show. It gave it, you know, the Forklift song, which is a big deal and, you know, still probably available on a t-shirt today or something.
And Jack Perkins, like two things that came back again and again.
Exactly. But yet, even though it's sort of a historically important episode and it's a funny episode, it is not a beginner-friendly episode. It is not an easy win for everybody because outside of those highlight moments, it's just a difficult movie. That was what I was thinking. And then I went and I was reading up just random web pages with people responding to the movie. And I think a lot of people kind of agree with this. There's a fair number of people out there who seem to think this has some really solid moments and it's not a bad episode, but it's just not the best episode.
That's fair. Where did it fall on the top 100?
On the top 100, it fell at a respectable number 30, just below the criminally far too low on this list, Catalina Caper.
That's criminal indeed.
And just above two other TV shows turned into quote-unquote movies, Master Ninja 1 and Time of the Apes.
Those scored that high in the top 100?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I guess it is a hallmark of some of the early episodes that they had these, you know, Frankenstein together TV shows that, you know, sort of had a continuous plot, but mostly kind of didn't. And I mean, I'm sure it's what people think of when they think of the old Comedy Central era.
Sandy Frank special.
It is a Sandy Frank special.
Any further thoughts now that you've watched this movie another time?
I don't think that the first time I watched the movie, I noticed the cheek implants as much, but then you mentioned it in our last recording, and then they talked about it nonstop in the riffing, and now I just can't get it out of my head. Poor Captain Joe, right? Like it made his career what his career was to get those implants. But watching this for the season 3 episode, it was just like, oh God, every time he turns his face, it's just a kind of an off-putting silhouette. So that's my takeaway from this one. How about you? Are there things that you're struck by with season 3 that you just weren't for KTMA?
You know, that's a great question, but I had watched season 3 and the sequel before we recorded the KTMA episode. So I feel like that already informed what I said, so I have to be kind of boring. It is nice to have everybody on set and not just Josh and Joel.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the riffing, as you said in our last episode, last time was very much the two of them just playing off of each other and not necessarily off of the movie. So I think I appreciate that the riffs in season 3 are really more directed at the movie and towards the characters that we're seeing. And maybe that's why we get more of the cheek references rather than, them just sparring with new verbs.
Yeah. Listeners, if you skipped the previous episode because you haven't seen the KTMA one, but you're hoping in this episode we're going to give you behind-the-scenes details of how Fugitive Alien was made and all the stuff like that we sometimes talk about, you have chosen the wrong episode. Go listen to the other one. We're going to have fun on this one. And speaking of which, let's start having some fun.
Sweet. Chris, let's try to kill them with a forklift.
Okay, Charlotte, set us up. Tell us what the context for the forklifts are in this episode.
So, for those of you guys playing along with the home game, there's a scene inside of the movie where Ken is wandering with his inner monologue through the big warehouse, and then Rocky comes at him with a forklift, and there's Ken, and he turns around. The forklift is coming at him, and he has to grab it with his hands and then, using his superhuman strength, push the forklift away so it doesn't kill him. Because guess what? Rocky tried to kill him with a forklift.
Olay.
And then they fight. Pew, pew.
Ever since we started this podcast 8,000 years ago, I have been dreaming of the day when we would do a segment all about forklifts.
You have the weirdest dreams, dude.
But I also was very excited to make you do the research for that so I could sit back like I was an audience member and just learn all about forklifts, these mysterious creatures from the deep that I simply know nothing about. So tell me their lore. Tell me the folklore of the forklift.
I love that you have this vision of forklifts as if they came out, like they were in the water and then they sprouted their little wheels and they came out onto the shores in an evolutionary process. I mean, they kind of did have an evolutionary process because they started in the 1800s as something that was hand powered.
Wait. In the 1800s, were there fork horses?
No. I mean, in the same way that people are not fish, forklifts are not the things that showed up in the 1800s. But in the 1800s, they did start creating machines, essentially, that you could use to, on wheels to push things around, kind of like an exaggerated dolly. And then you could use human power like you do for a car jack to lift something higher up to be able to move things around that were particularly heavy. And then as the Industrial Revolution happened, they started finding ways to use motors to do it. And you have this evolution of something from what was basically like an exaggerated dolly into the forklift that we know now as a car with a cage around it and the two prongs that lift things up.
Charlotte, are you telling me that forklifts are Carol Channing, an exaggerated dolly?
Yes.
This is the best segment I could have hoped for.
This is the turning point of my life. To have you take what I just said and turn it into that one nugget of wisdom that, listeners, if that doesn't change your life, I just don't know what will.
So Mecha Carol Channings are out there lifting things for us. Great.
Yes. And it totally revolutionized a whole bunch of stuff with the motorized forklift, now warehouses can stack things taller and taller. So you don't need warehouses to be as enormous in terms of the floor space as they once were because you have forklifts that are able to lift things onto higher and higher shelves, right? Can you imagine how big a Costco would be if you didn't have forklifts that could put things onto those top shelves? It would be devastatingly large. It's already too large. You're walking around for get 10,000 steps just to go shopping there.
And I'm imagining now that, sometimes when one creature evolves, another creature evolves with it. This led to the pallet.
Yes. It was one of the things that made forklifts so perfect for warehouse use is that they started standardizing pallet widths and lengths to be able to stack things efficiently and to be able to use forklifts so that you didn't have to have, 100 different designs of forklifts or they'd only work with certain pallets and not others. Standardization, I know we rail against it all the time, but it's really helpful for industry, it turns out.
Oh, no, it can be quite good for machines, but we are not most of us machines.
If you say so, Chris, if you say so.
Well, I mean, depending on how you define a machine and how you define people. But yes.
It's true. But that's like a whole other segment. We might have even done that segment.
unless you've got human forklifts somewhere in your notes, we'll deal with that later.
Human forklifts in my notes. No, but I do have depictions of forklifts in my notes because, like, this whole suggestion that a forklift could be a killer was kind of like, what forklift characters do I know that have, like, been dramatized? Do I know of a forklift death in a movie? So those are the kinds of things I was thinking about. And of course, I was thinking about forklifts in animation. And the first forklift that came to mind, of course, came from...
Transformers.
No. Bob the Builder.
Bob the Builder.
I don't care about Transformers. God. Although I'm sure they had a really excellent one. Bob the Builder has a forklift named Trix. And she is not a killer, Chris. I'm here to tell you, Trix is not a killer. She just wants to be helpful. She's purple. She works at the little...
she's the Barney of forklifts.
Well, she's not the Barney. Oh,
she's
my
a
goodness.
friend instead of a natural predator, like a proper dinosaur.
Oh, yeah. She's just not a killer, Chris. Not a killer.
All right, so I'm on the Transformers wiki page, and there is a Transformer who transforms into a forklift. His name is Deadlift.
Of course it is.
And he's a Decepticon, I should say. And
no.
And they've got a picture of him as a toy, transformed into a robot and transformed into the forklift. And underneath the caption, it says, "He tried to kill me as a forklift, Olay." This is what I'm saying. It's a very important episode.
Wow. I mean, I knew that Transformers had a line of equipment, right? Because they have a bulldozer, right? They have a crane. Of course they do, because it's cars and you want things like that.
Yeah.
But I did not even think to look at the Transformers forklift, because the other forklift that I was thinking of was of course Guido from Cars.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I've not seen any Cars films, but I know some of the more famous ones. Do I know Guido? I don't think I do. I know Tow Mater.
Oh, yeah. So Guido lives in the same town as Mater, of course. Guido works with Luigi. They work at the tire shop. Luigi speaks English, but Guido only speaks Italian. And Guido is one of the forklifts that lifts up the cars and does all of the removing of tires and the putting on of fresh tires. And of course, in the first Cars movie, Guido gets to go up against all of these enormous pit crews at the Piston Cup, and he, in record time, changes all of the tires on Lightning McQueen, which, of course, not getting tires changed is why he didn't win the Piston Cup in the first time, and it made the whole movie happen. So Guido saving the day. As a forklift, little teeny forklift, he's very cute.
So instead of "he tried to kill me with a forklift," it would be like, "You lift me up," kind of that sort of thing?
It's way more like that. Yes. So yeah, those are the two that I was really looking at. And then I was thinking about, like, are there other places where forklifts come up? And, I thought about barbed wire.
Okay, yeah.
Because there's a scene in Barbed Wire, right, where there's that really large man who's being carried around, and Barbed Wire has to, like, negotiate with him for the contacts and everything, and for a safe passage through, the really scary zone. I can't remember what it was called. It's been too long. But he's not carried by a forklift. He's carried by, like, a front loader. So that's not a forklift. But there is something similar to that in a Family Guy episode where the dad in Family Guy is being carried around by a forklift. And it looks very much like the scene from Barbed Wire, but it's sort of like a "you lift me up" thing, but it's not as inspiring as Guido.
Right. Okay. I feel pretty confident that at some point Adam told me that there was a horror movie, at least one, where somebody does impale somebody with a forklift.
I mean, wouldn't it be weird if there wasn't?
And yeah, it would. Yeah, it would be very suspicious. I'd be very suspicious of Big Forklift for suppressing that idea.
Absolutely right. Big industry is keeping us from seeing. But the thing is, big industry doesn't stop us from knowing how dangerous forklifts are. They spend a lot of time making safety videos and coming up with rules like, carry it low, drive it slow. These are good things to know.
Is that from a video that Troy McClure does the intro for?
Yes, absolutely. And in creating your safety zones, like the danger zone within a 3-foot radius of your forklift, and then the, warning zone is the 3 to 6 foot out. And it's like, yes, these things make sense. I'm glad we have safety regulations for forklifts. So yes, industry is telling us that forklifts are dangerous. I don't think they'd necessarily be anti the horror movie. It's just that how many horror movies take place in warehouses?
More than 0. Quite a few more than 0.
Certainly more than 0, but not as many as happen in a sorority house. Are there forklifts in a sorority house? Maybe there should be, Chris.
We shouldn't have built our sorority house on this ancient forklift burial ground.
The ghosts of Guido and Trix and Deadlift are going to come after us. But there is a really cool way that you can deal with forklifts, just to close it out. They have forklift competitions.
Oh, yes. I think I've seen something about this.
International forklift competitions.
I feel like, now tell me if I'm wrong, I feel like the forklifts do most of the heavy lifting in these.
Well, that's what they're designed for, Chris. Shouldn't they be doing most of the heavy lifting?
Well, all right, but it's not like a race card thing where
no,
the driver is theoretically adding something in addition to the technicians and the pit crew and all that.
No, it's true. And in fact, it's not a race in the same way that the Indianapolis 500 or something, right? It's not about speed. It's about so much more, right? It's about steering and stacking. It's about balancing. It's about being fast enough to get good speed, but slow enough that you're not dropping everything everywhere, right? Because if you're a forklift operator, you're wanting to move many things, probably tall things simultaneously, because that's how you're going to make efficient use of your time. But you can't go too fast because otherwise everything's going to start falling over. Or, if you stop too quickly, you could end up having your forklift topple over. Especially if you have something lifted really high just because of, physics. But yeah, there's a competition in Germany that happens every October. It's called the Stapler Cup. It's amazing. We'll post some videos in the show notes. There's one in the U.S. called a forklift rodeo.
Oh, is there a junior forklift rodeo where people get out their little Tonka toys?
I just don't think that the mayor has found some, disobedient boys to force to do a forklift rodeo.
Well, that's why they need an old timer to sort that out.
We all need a good old timer for that.
All this talk of forklifts and, killer forklifts at that makes me think of, I finally got around to watching The Straight Story, the David Lynch film.
Oh.
Where the old man drives his
John Deere tractor.
Lawnmower. It's a lawnmower.
You're right. It's a riding lawnmower.
He does a riding lawnmower and he rides it across the state and so forth, several hundred miles to go see his brother who's just had a terrible incident. What if, instead of a riding lawnmower, he was driving a forklift, intent on killing his brother one last time?
Oh, that would be a Tarantino movie instead. It would be very different than what David Lynch gave us, which was, heartwarming and endearing. But that doesn't make it bad. Ooh.
I want it to be the same cast. I want it to still be Richard Farnsworth, still be Harry Dean Stanton, still Sissy Spacek in there.
You can't do that, buddy.
No, it's too late now, obviously, but
it's way too late now. I wonder if there's if there's footage on the floor of the editing room where basically David Lynch shot that and he was like, I can't put this out in the public. I got to put out something a little bit more loving and endearing.
They filmed the whole thing. And then they were like, no, let's try again.
Parallel storylines. David Lynch is way into parallel storylines, Chris. You know that. But you know what is endearing and slightly dangerous, Chris?
What?
Going back to forklift racing, there's a group of seniors in Minnesota that use battery-operated mini forklifts that they drive with remote controls. And they have competitions with other seniors in other senior centers where they have to move things around with their remote-controlled forklifts. And they're watching each other as they're simulcast, like via Zoom or something, to move things around. And they compete with each other for like moving things around. It's really adorable. And they have to put things in certain places and they have to work together as a team. And it's really, I'm totally, again, link in the show notes to the racing forklifts in Carver, Minnesota. The seniors in Carver are called the River Rats. I think it's the straight story, but with forklifts. It's what you're looking for without the killing.
That's not really it.
Hey everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 fun facts about today's experiment, Fugitive Alien, all stacked onto the forklift of knowledge headed straight for you. Take it away, Charlotte.
This is the episode which introduces Mike Nelson's take on Jack Perkins. So let's celebrate with some fun facts about Jack Perkins. Perkins started out as a reporter for NBC. In the mid-'80s, he traveled to Maine to do a story on Stephen King and fell in love with the place.
So naturally, he left his job, and he and his wife bought a chunk of a small island off Bar Harbor and lived there, right in the middle of Acadia National Park.
Naturally, this led him to start working on photography, landscape photography in particular. Oh, and poetry. Wrote a lot of poetry for a while. And he found God, specifically Jesus.
Yeah, he wrote a whole book about this. Finding Moosewood, Finding God. Moosewood was the name he gave his cabin, you see. He and his wife lived there for 13 years.
And during that time, Perkins was invited to host a few documentaries for a new cable network, A&E. At the time, A&E was the Arts and Entertainment Network, but they changed the name of the network in 1995 to just A&E because apparently art makes bad TV. Well.
Anyway, this was back when A&E gave a flop about the arts. Perkins liked the A&E folks, and they liked his presentation style, which was, somehow both serene and even-keeled while being highly excited about the world and all its wonders, all while having the instincts of a reporter who takes no nonsense.
It only required a few days of work each month to be the face of A&E, so this was a happy medium for him. But after a while, Perkins was getting older and they had some health scares and they wanted to be closer to medical facilities.
And so Perkins and his wife Mary Jo, no, not Mary Jo Peel, though. Wow, that would be a heck of a twist to this story, wouldn't it? Anyway, Perkins and his wife moved down to Florida, and there they found another island to live on. Look, once you get used to living on a small island, it's hard to go back to the mainland.
They sold Moosewood to the National Park Service, and the house was reincorporated into the park. So, that's nice. Oh, this is also when Perkins wrapped up his tenure as co-host of A&E's biography.
Right. You'll notice that they don't mention biography in this episode because Perkins wasn't doing that yet. It wasn't until 1994 that Perkins joined Peter Graves of It Conquered the World fame as host of that show. They would alternate hosting duties.
Look, biography was probably the most popular thing on A&E in the mid-'90s, and they rode that wave as far as they could. It was basically on 6 nights a week and was soon spun off into all sorts of other shows and home videos and CD-ROMs and board games. Truly, America had biography fever.
But, if I'm understanding the timing right, Perkins and Graves stopped hosting biography in 1999, around the time that Perkins moved to Florida. But you can't keep a guy like Perkins idle for too long, and so he hosted a local show called A Gulf Coast Journal until 2012.
Jack Perkins passed away in 2019 at the age of 85. He was apparently a big fan of Mike Nelson's version of Jack Perkins, and who wouldn't be? Either Perkins made for what I think is some of the best TV has to offer.
And that's time. So, as you mentioned in your summary of the episode, one of the things that happens in the middle of it is that Joel and the bots are so confused about what's going on in this mishmash of an entertainment package that they try to break down how the plot of this so-called movie is structured using Sid Field's classic text, Screenplay.
I had never heard of Sid Field in connection to this. But I noticed on Joel's diagram, of course, that he's talking about this as a 3-act structure. And I've heard so many movie commentaries talk about plot lines in terms of a 3-act structure. Is Sid Field really the guy who created that theory?
It's more complicated than that, perhaps. The 3-act structure, or like the breaking a dramatic work into 3 parts, dates back to Aristotle. So like Sid Field's a little late on that game.
Sure.
But he did package it into this book, and this book was very influential. And so a lot of people grew up either trained directly by Sid Field because he did become a teacher and he taught a lot of people like Judd Apatow and so forth. But also they just read the book, which I decided I would also read the book because I've always kind of meant to. And I was intrigued to see what it was like.
So what year would this book have come out?
The book was first published in 1984. And I read a revision that I think was from 2005.
Okay.
So it mentions a few more recent movies instead of just talking about Chinatown all the time. Though I have seen Chinatown, so I didn't mind. Chinatown's a great movie. I did not mind reading about Chinatown a bunch. But I was also happy to read about some other films, which we might talk about in a second. I do want to give you a few little fun facts about Sid Field, because like some of his like life story stuff is really interesting. And so he brings up a lot of his backstory into it. He tells a lot of stories about his life and about the different people and films that he's worked with and so forth. And so there's a lot of that. And some of these details are kind of amazing. First off, he was born in Hollywood, which I think gives him a certain amount of right to write a book about how movies are made.
Yeah, I should think so.
He was born in Hollywood in 1935, and his uncle, who worked in the industry, got him a role in Gone with the Wind.
Oh my gosh.
When he was a toddler.
He was a toddler and Gone with the Wind. What was he, like Melanie and Ashley's baby?
Well, we'll never know because he was cut.
Oh, fair enough. He still got to be on set, right? He still got to experience that whole...
Yeah, as a 3 or 4-year-old, he got to experience that exactly. But he would get to experience more, of course. He was high school friends with a guy named Frank Mazzola, who was the person that they talked to when they wanted to know what teen gangs were like when they made the film Rebel Without a Cause.
Wow.
So he like has all sorts of stories about meeting James Dean and all that kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah.
He eventually went to UC Berkeley, studied under the filmmaker Jean Renoir, and then he went to UCLA's film department and collaborated on a short film with Jim Morrison and Ray Manzarek.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely wild.
Very excellent. Phenomenal that he gets to go from being in Gone with the Wind to working with the Doors.
And then he worked at a place where he went through like a slush pile. It was a production company, and he was in charge of going through the pile of screenplays and like picking out the ones to recommend to the people who got to make the big decisions.
Oh man.
And that's where he started like thinking about like, wait, like I know how to read and I know what I like when I read it, but like I actually need to decide like what makes a good screenplay.
It's a fair question, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very different kind of beast. So he spent a lot of time thinking about this, and obviously eventually he would go on to teach this. In between, he had another interesting job. For a little while, he was a writer and researcher for a documentary TV show called Biography.
Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of it. Uh-huh.
This is the pre-A&E version that Mike Wallace hosted in the 60s, but nevertheless, weird little connection for this episode.
Totally, yes. Oh my gosh. So when he went to think about what makes a good screenplay, did he do it based on the screenplays he was reading and how he was responding to them? Or did he go back and do research for things like Aristotle's 3-act structure or whatever? You know what I mean?
My sense is that he didn't so much talk about Aristotle, but he does talk about reading classic movies as well. He looked at the scripts of important movies, and he talked with other people in the business when they were picking things and thinking about, what smart things you have to say about what makes a good screenplay versus a good play, because they're completely different beasts.
So this is all about movies. So it's not about stories in general. It's not about other presentations. So it's not even about a TV show. It's just a movie.
Just a movie, just a 2-hour commercial Hollywood movie.
Wow.
There's a really fascinating section that I read where he's like leading a class and he's talking about the process of like developing a character and coming up with a movie. Mm-hmm. And so he's with the class and he's like, well, let's start something. Somebody tell me something. Just give me something. And somebody says like Boston. And he's like, okay, it's a guy from Boston. And then a bunch of women in the class say, she's from Boston. And it's like, okay, great. It's a woman from Boston. Fine. Tell me more. How old is she? And the class says, about 24. And he's like, no way. Gotta be in her late 20s, early 30s. And they're like, what are you even talking about?
Yeah, why?
And he's like, if you're writing a screenplay, you have to be able to pin it to your dream actor. And that has to sound good for a production company. So all the famous stars at this point in the early 2000s, all of the famous stars are women in their late 20s and early 30s. You're going to want to say, I don't know, Julia Roberts or whoever. I forget who the exact names were that he mentioned at the time. But like, you need to be able to pin it on that. And the younger women are not going to be as big a star yet. So write it for the big famous people. And I was like, that's an insane choice.
Yes.
But okay.
Yes. It's an insane choice for a couple of reasons. Because, of course, if you're playing a character that's 28, you're not actually 28.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you're 24, you're playing a teenager on a television show, or you're playing a teenager in a movie. You're not actually playing something your own age. Like, that's really unusual to be doing. So if you're casting it for somebody who's playing a 28-year-old, you're actually probably getting somebody in their early 30s. Or maybe they're 24 even. I don't know. Oh, Hollywood.
Yeah. So the stuff that Joel talks about is all in the first chapter of the book. And it's a pretty solid explanation of how he's discerning this, of the 3-act structure and of how that works out. So let's go through this real quick.
Okay.
First act, which is about 30 pages, which is to say about 30 minutes of your movie, establishes the character. It's got to launch the dramatic premise, like what is going on. And it's got to, you got to know the character's relationship with all the other characters. In fact, you've really got about 10 minutes to set all this up. If you're not hitting it in the first 10 minutes, nobody's going to make your movie.
Yeah. If you can't get to Tatooine and find Luke Skywalker in the first 10 minutes, you've already lost everybody.
Exactly.
You might even have to get as far as Obi-Wan Kenobi at that point. Yes? Old Ben? Whew, that's a lot of setup to do in a very short amount of time.
Right, because then you've got to pivot to Act 2 with a plot point. Plot points are these little pivoting moments, incidents, things like that. The first plot point is like when you decide to do the thing. So when Luke Skywalker decides he's going to go with Obi-Wan after his family's killed. Spoilers. But
oh, man, Chris!
And that leads you into Act 2, which is confrontation. So this is where you encounter all the obstacles. Obstacle after obstacle to keep the main character from getting the thing that they're trying to get. Their dramatic need, he calls it.
And the fugitive alien Ken's dramatic need as he's floating out in space?
Well, I mean, this is a thing we can ask. So like we establish the character, we establish who he is, and he gets onto the ship. And like, what is the plot point? What is the thing that gets him into the part where he's, makes a decision to do what he's going to do in this movie? Well, it's when he joins the crew, right?
But that's so far into the movie.
Well, it's not a good movie, and also this is it's also not a movie at all. So it's played by very different rules.
It's true. And it is the case that like when he chooses to join the crew is when new things need to happen.
Yes. And so then there's going to be another plot point at the end of Act 2.
Rita? Is Rita the new plot point?
Oh, good heavens. We can't use this bad movie to analyze it because it's not even trying to play the game. But it's going to be like the big moment where the stakes get really raised or you understand your situation in a new way. And that will get you towards Act 3, which is when everything resolves in one way or another. So that's the big 3-act structure. And you can see why it's really difficult to apply that to Fugitive.
Well, yeah,
it was a very clever idea to do that.
Well, it definitely gave them the bots and Joel had different perspectives. And then you throw Jack Perkins in there as well. I loved the board at the back that Dr. F and Frank had been writing notes on and have the string lines like it's a murder investigation on CSI or something.
Yes.
It was wonderful to see how they were trying to make sense of this screenplay, which is like, the people who are trying to torture Joel pulling that torture onto themselves.
So one of the movies that he brings up as an example to go through all of this is Fellowship of the Ring.
Nice. Okay.
So what would you think is Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and what are the plot points that serve each of the functions between them? A little pop quiz here.
Sure. This is terribly unfair since, of course, it existed as a book and a story before it was ever a movie. But there were some adaptation choices, sure. I would think if the Act 1 has to establish all of the characters, it has to go all the way to the actual founding of the Fellowship in Rivendell.
Interesting.
It has to, because otherwise you don't have, I mean, you're introducing the characters slowly, right? Because you have Sam and Frodo, and you have Gandalf, and then you meet Aragorn, but you still need Gimli and Legolas and Boromir, right? You still need to meet the elves. You still need to hear more about the conflict that's going on, you know? So there's many things that haven't been established when you're at the Prancing Pony meeting Aragorn that you kind of need, I think, in Act One, don't you? Where would you put it?
Well, I think you're making a perfectly good argument. In the book, Sid Field argues that the plot point is when they set out from the Shire. That's when they've made the decision to go, because this is not the Fellowship story. This is Frodo's story.
Well, it takes 3 movies to tell Frodo's story, so that's not fair. That means the Fellowship of the Ring is Act 1. I mean...
Well, sure, but it also, you gotta make your decisions here.
Sure.
The point of analysis is to give you sort of frameworks to think with, not to be an ironclad set of rules. I think you're making a very valid point. I think it's interesting that you disagree with him a bit, but I don't know. I'm not saying either of you are right or wrong. I just think it's interesting.
I would think he's read more screenplays than I have and has certainly a better idea of what makes a successful movie than I do. But if the point of Act One is to establish characters, I think you at least need to go as far as getting Aragorn. Otherwise, you just don't have enough characters, right? There's too many more that are getting introduced. But he's putting it through leaving the Shire. That's great. I mean, there's another turning point then when you get to the establishment of the Fellowship, because that's another decision point, right?
Well, that's just part of the confrontations, right? The confrontation is the difficulty of getting these people together so that we can move on to the next part, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how they're understanding the drama of that scene. I think he doesn't mention the council. So where do you think plot point 2 is when we go from the series of confrontations up to the resolution? Where do the stakes sort of become clear, or the end game of the movie at least kick into high?
This is so hard because it's interesting to do this for Fellowship of the Ring, only because Fellowship of the Ring as a single standalone movie has so many beginnings of stories for the entire 3-movie arc. So I was tempted to say the looking into the mirror with Galadriel could be that confrontation of what's at stake.
That is exactly what he says as well. It's when Galadriel reveals the fate of Middle-earth if they don't succeed. That is when it's like, oh, okay, yeah, we got to do this. And they move on to the end. Now, obviously, as you say, that doesn't really fully work, because although it's going to culminate in the battle, there's still quite a lot of plot that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Before we actually get to the resolution.
Because this movie was never intended to be a single movie, a standalone movie. It's intended to... it's intended to create and to set things up for the next movie and to set things up for the 3rd movie, right? It's a 3-book structure. It's a 3-movie structure from the get-go. And now, I wonder now for movies, so many movies that have been coming out recently are all continuing sagas within the Marvel universe or the Star Wars universe, right? You have this sense that nothing can ever come to a final end and everything has to be setting up the next movie and setting up the next sequel. And I wonder if Sid Field or any of his disciples, I guess, have talked about revising this structure in lieu of that continued saga in a movie universe.
That's a great question. He may even talk about it later in the book than I've gotten to yet. I don't know. So, yeah, I'm sure there are listeners who are a lot more familiar. I know that there are listeners who listen to this who have made movies. So, there are definitely people who've thought about this more than I have. But I will say, it's a very readable book. I think anybody who thinks about movies should read it. Or at least read the first couple chapters or whatever. Poke about it. You don't need to read it cover to cover, but you'll get something out of it, I think.
Hey, Chris. Butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter. What is this supposed to do for me? Butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter.
Well, first off, you're saying it slightly wrong, but second off...
Oh, come on! How am I saying it wrong?
It is batagata, batagata, typically, rather than butter, gutter. Yeah. And if you listen again, you might be able to make it out. So here's what's happening. G-forces are kicking in. All the crew's faces, or maybe everything but Ken, is getting distorted like they're on a roller coaster. It's going floppity, 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 floppity. And Tom says...
Let's loosen up with some bunagatas.
And this is an articulation exercise, the kind of thing that we should probably be doing before we start recording each episode.
If it's an articulation exercise, why am I not articulating my R's?
Because it's B-A-D-A-G-A is typically how it goes. And one version that I found of this is that you say, it was slightly different, but it was badaga, 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 ba. Badaga, 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 bo, badaga, 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 be, etc. Like you practice the end of your vowels at the end of your thing. And you also do it without voicing it. So it's badaga, 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 ba, badaga, 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 be, etc.
Oh my gosh, my brain is exploding, Chris.
So I thought it might be fun to look up some articulation exercises, things that are fun to say and practice.
Is this like tongue twisters like the seashells?
It is.
She sells? Oh God, this is going to be terrible and awesome.
It sure is. Okay. So there are 3 kinds that I could find. I don't know if people have divided this up, if they're serious about it. I just found some web pages for actors that seemed reasonable enough.
Sure.
One of them was these kind of syllable exercises where you just practice making individual sounds that you're going to say a lot. And related to that, there were sort of technical ones where you do like lip trills, that sort of thing.
Uh-huh.
Or you practice making your voice like meow, nasal and back.
Okay.
So you just feel your voice and your muscles of your face and your head seem to be the idea behind these.
Huh.
Which is also the idea behind the syllable one, right? You're just practicing making these little like drum fills with your mouth, so to speak.
So that you get all warmed up so that those muscles are working properly.
Exactly. But then, perhaps most fun are the tongue twister ones. Do you know of any? Because they come up as riffs sometimes on the show. Do you know of any tongue twisters that are articulation exercises that actors might use?
Not off the top of my head, no. I mean, I know the seashells and then there's the toy boat, but that's not really a tongue twister.
No, but it is that kind of thing. One of the ones that comes up sometimes, in addition to those, is Unique New York, Unique New York.
Unique New York?
Unique New York. You often are supposed to say these a few times.
Unique New York, Unique New York, Unique New York. Yeah, because you start tripping over your tongue as you're saying them. Or I do.
Exactly. Another fun one that I saw was red leather, yellow leather.
Oh, well, that's a very different kind of articulation exercise. Red leather, yellow leather. Yeah.
Yep.
That yellow really trips you up. Yeah.
Do you want to try it again?
Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather. Yeah, no. Wow. Is this a segment where eventually you're going to have me try one of these tongue twisters and I end up saying something like completely foul and not even realizing that it's like, oh, joke's on you, Charlotte?
I mean, I didn't plan it that way, but we could. I could definitely add Fish City to the list. But no, some of them are really fun. There's another one in the red leather, yellow leather school. High roller, low roller, lower roller.
What is it? High roller, low roller, lower roller?
That's
it. Is that what you said? Okay. High roller, low roller, lower roller?
Yep.
High, lower. No, yeah. Wow.
High roller, low roller.
High roller,
low roller, lower.
Lower roller.
Nope, I can't do it.
Yeah,
high roller, low roller, lower roller. It's a really good one.
Yeah. My brain's having a hard time like giving the signals to my mouth to be able to go through those words for some reason.
Okay. There's a few more I want to do, mostly because when they get really long, they sometimes end up being really fun sentences.
Okay.
So here's one about a dog having an interesting day.
Oh, okay.
The jolly collie swallowed a lollipop.
The jolly collie swallowed a lollipop?
Yep.
Nice. The jolly collie swallowed a lollipop.
It's nice.
The jolly collie swallowed a lollipop. Sure.
Along the same lines, I was very charmed by, I want a proper cup of... Nope, let me try it again. I want a proper cup of coffee from a proper copper coffee pot. I want a proper cup of coffee from a proper copper pot. I want a proper cup of coffee from a proper coffee pot. I want a proper cup of coffee from a proper copper coffee pot. What is so hard to understand about this request?
Seriously, I wish for this proper cup of coffee too. From a proper coffee pot. Proper
Proper
copper?
copper coffee pot.
Proper copper coffee pot.
Proper copper coffee pot.
Proper copper coffee pot. It just makes me think of the guy in the Goonies, Chester Copperfield, who, of course, Chester Copperpots. Chester Copperpots. He didn't get as far as the Goonies did in that movie.
Oh, no. I'm sure you could make a good tongue twister about it.
Yeah, I think Sean Austin's already done it, so we're good. Chris, I have no more articulation in me whatsoever. I am really hoping you have our final factoid today.
Sure. Just a quick one, and it's about the one that got away. Sometimes I have no idea what's happening. So, early in the film, in the opening credit sequences, there's shots of a rocket going into space and all sorts of fire and everything. And Crow says...
Hey, it's a Rolling Stones hotel room.
I kind of think it looks like Morton Thigh in the early days.
Right. And so what Tom said there, what is he talking about? It looks like Morton Thigh in the early days? Mort and Thigh? Morton Thigh?
Yes.
Morden?
Yes.
I went down a rabbit hole and spent far too long trying to figure this out and got far too many images of diseased thighs as results.
Oh, Chris, you took that one for the team. I'm so sorry. That's not what they're talking about.
That's not it.
Yes.
But I don't know what it is, and I couldn't find anyone else even asking what it was about this episode.
No one's asking the important questions, Chris. What is Morton Thigh?
Well, maybe we're missing something obvious, but listener, if you know what a Morton Thigh is, please put me out of my misery and let me know, because I hate it when I can't even come close to figuring out what we're talking about.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you are hashtag forklift certified, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our email is info@itsjustashow.com, and we're on Blue Sky. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, Ella. Thank you, Ella. For about $1 an episode, you can be like Ella and help us research and record this show. You can join us in a friendly Discord, and you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. If you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/177.
Listeners, a little behind the scene action. The articulation exercises did nothing to prepare Charlotte for reading that.
You would think that articulation exercises would make it easier, but no. Sheer adrenaline is the only thing that helps me.
Unfortunately, I have fully twisted your tongue.
It's true, but hopefully I'll get it untwisted by the time we get to our next episode, which surely can't be another Fugitive Alien already.
It isn't. We're going to put that off for a little while longer. No, next time we're going to be looking at Season 9, Episode 6, Space Children, with a short that we've actually seen recently, Century 21 Calling.
Ooh, that should be fun. I mean, we saw it with the Mads riffing it all on their own, but now, gosh, Season 9, that means it's going to be Mike and Crow and Tom, right?
Yeah.
Ooh, should be fun.
Should be. We'll find out next time. But until then...
Hey, they're having a jumpsuit party, and his is the grandest of all.
I tire of pudding. Bring me something salty and crunchy and sweet. Take it away, Theme Squad.
Butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter, butter gutter. What is this supposed to do for me?